My name is Emily. I am 25 years old and have been working as a nurse for the past 7 years. I saved every penny I could to buy my own home someday, $175,000 to be exact. When my parents divorced, my mom remarried a wealthy man with a daughter. I trusted my mom completely, which is why we had a joint account. Yesterday, I discovered all my money was gone. They used it to buy an apartment for my stepsister. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. I had a relatively happy childhood before my parents divorced. We weren't rich by any means, but we had enough to get by. My dad worked as an accountant, while my mom stayed home to take care of me. I remember weekends filled with pancake breakfasts and trips to the local park. Our house was small, but filled with laughter. Everything changed when I was 10 years old. The fighting between my parents started small at first, just little arguments about money or household chores. But soon it escalated to full-blown shouting matches that would keep me awake at night. I would hide under my blankets with my hands over my ears, praying for the fighting to stop. When they finally announced the divorce, I was almost relieved. At least the constant tension would be over. What I didn't expect was that my father would move across the country to Seattle for a new job opportunity. Suddenly, the dad who had been at every school event and tucked me in every night was reduced to occasional phone calls and an annual visit during summer break. My mom and I struggled after the divorce. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 10 years and had to re-enter the workforce with outdated skills. She took whatever job she could find, waitressing in the mornings and cleaning houses in the afternoons. There were months when I knew she was choosing between paying the electricity bill and buying groceries. I started working as soon as I could. At 16, I got a job at the local grocery store, stocking shelves after school. I would hand most of my paycheck to my mom to help with bills, keeping just enough for school supplies and the occasional movie with friends. It wasn't the carefree teenage experience most kids had, but it taught me the value of hard work and saving. Everything changed again when I was 15 and my mom met Richard. He came into the restaurant where she was waitressing and asked her out. Richard was everything my dad wasn't: confident, ambitious, and most importantly, wealthy. He owned a successful real estate development company and lived in a mansion in the nicest part of town. Richard was a widower with a daughter named Natalie, who was exactly my age. From the first time I met her, I could tell we were going to have problems. Natalie had grown up with every advantage: designer clothes, expensive vacations, and the latest technology. She had never heard the word no in her life, and it showed in her attitude. When my mom and Richard got married 6 months after meeting, we moved into his mansion. Suddenly, I went from sharing a two-bedroom apartment to living in a house with 6 bedrooms and a swimming pool. I should have been thrilled, but something felt off about the whole situation. My mom changed after she married Richard. She started dressing differently, talking differently, even laughing differently. The woman who had taught me the importance of working hard and being independent now seemed content to let Richard make all the decisions, and those decisions usually favored Natalie. When it came time for college, I announced my plans to become a nurse. Richard offered to pay for Natalie to attend an expensive private university to study fashion design. But when it came to my education, he was suddenly concerned about the value of investing in nursing school. My mom, who had once been so proud of my academic achievements, simply nodded along with his assessment. I ended up paying for nursing school myself through a combination of scholarships, student loans, and working multiple jobs. It was exhausting, but I was determined to succeed. I worked as a nursing assistant, on weekends a tutor during the week, and picked up night shifts at a 24-hour diner whenever I could. Throughout all of this, I maintained the joint bank account my mom and I had set up when I was 16. Initially, it was meant to be an emergency fund for both of us, but after she married Richard, she no longer needed the financial safety net. I continued depositing my paychecks into the account, watching with pride as the balance grew. Over 7 years, I managed to save $175,000. Every overtime shift, every holiday I worked, instead of celebrated, every small luxury I denied myself went into that account. It represented not just money, but my independence and future security. Through all the challenges with my mom and Richard, I maintained a close relationship with my grandmother, my dad's mother. She lived about an hour away, and I would visit her whenever I could. She was the one person who consistently supported my goals and reminded me of my worth when my mother and Richard made me feel invisible. As my savings grew, so did my dream of owning my own home. I started looking at listings in my area, attending open houses on my rare days off. I wanted a place that was truly mine, where I didn't have to feel like an unwelcome guest or listen to Natalie complain about how hard her life was while she spent thousands on shopping sprees. Little did I know that my dream was about to be shattered by the people who were supposed to care about me the most. After months of searching, I finally found the perfect house. It wasn't anything fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home in a good neighborhood, close to the hospital where I worked. The asking price was $300,000, and I planned to use my savings for a substantial down payment. I had already been pre-approved for a mortgage based on my steady income and excellent credit score. I scheduled a meeting with my real estate agent Lisa to make an offer on the house. I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before. This was it, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. I even wore my lucky scrub top to the hospital that morning, convinced it was going to be a perfect day. After my shift ended, I changed into more professional clothes and drove straight to Lisa's office. She had the paperwork ready, and we went through it line by line. When we got to the part about the down payment, I pulled out my phone to verify the exact amount in my account before writing it on the form. What I saw made my heart stop. Where there should have been $175,000 and some change, the balance showed just $42.17. I stared at the screen in disbelief, refreshing it over and over as if that would somehow make the numbers change. "Emily, is everything okay?" Lisa asked, noticing my sudden silence. I couldn't answer. My chest felt tight, and I couldn't seem to get enough air. The room started spinning around me. I was having a full-blown panic attack right there in the real estate office. Lisa helped me to a chair and got me a glass of water. When I could finally speak, I showed her my phone screen. "My money is gone. All of it. $175,000 just disappeared." She looked as shocked as I felt. "Let's call your bank right now," she suggested, her voice calm and reassuring despite the circumstances. With shaking hands, I dialed the customer service number. After verifying my identity and explaining the situation, the representative pulled up my account history. "Ms. Walker, I see a transfer was made from your account 3 days ago. The full balance was transferred to another account." "I didn't make any transfer," I said, my voice rising with panic. "The transfer was authorized by Janet Walker, who is listed as a joint account holder. She has full legal access to make transfers." My mother. The reality hit me like a physical blow. My own mother had emptied my account without even telling me. I thanked the representative and hung up, then immediately tried calling my mom. No answer. I called Richard's cell phone next. "Hello," he answered, sounding irritated as always when I called. "Richard, I need to speak to my mom right now." "It's an emergency. She's at her yoga class. What's so important? It can't wait. The money in my account is gone, all of it. Did she say anything to you about it?" There was a pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Oh, that. Yes, we needed it for Natalie's new apartment. Your mother was going to tell you about it this weekend." I felt like I'd been slapped. "You needed my money, all $175,000 of it, without asking me." "Emily, don't be so dramatic. It's just sitting in an account doing nothing. Natalie needed a place of her own, and this was a perfect investment opportunity." That money was for my house. I was literally about to make an offer today. "You can save it up again," he said casually, as if I could replace 7 years of savings overnight. "You're young, you have plenty of time. Natalie needed this now." I hung up without another word and told Lisa I needed to reschedule. Then I got in my car and drove straight to my mother and Richard's house, tears streaming down my face the entire way. I probably shouldn't have been driving in that state, but all I could think about was confronting them face to face. When I arrived at their house, I didn't even bother to knock. I used my key and stormed inside, finding them both in the kitchen. My mother was chopping vegetables while Richard sat at the island with a glass of scotch looking at something on his tablet. "How could you?" I screamed, startling them both. "How could you steal my entire life savings without even telling me?" My mother at least had the decency to look guilty. "Emily, honey, calm down. We were going to discuss it with you this weekend." Discuss what? The fact that you've already taken my money? That's not a discussion that's informing me of a theft after the fact. Richard sighed dramatically. As I told you on the phone, it was a necessary decision. Family helps family. Natalie needed an apartment and the opportunity came up suddenly. I'm family too, I shouted, my voice breaking. That money represented 7 years of working multiple jobs, taking extra shifts, missing holidays, and time with friends. That was my future you stole. My mother approached me, trying to put her hand on my arm. I pulled away. Emily, you know we would never do anything to hurt you. We just thought since you weren't using the money right now. I was about to use it today to buy a house. My real estate agent is probably still sitting in her office wondering what happened. Just then, Natalie walked into the kitchen, her eyes glued to her phone as usual. When she noticed me, she actually smiled. Emily, did Mom tell you I got the most amazing apartment downtown? You have to come to see it. The views are incredible. I stared at her, wondering if she knew her new apartment had been bought with my stolen money. The oblivious look on her face suggested she might not have been told the full story. Did you know they used my money to buy your apartment? I asked her directly. Her smile faltered. What? No, Dad said he was buying it as an investment that would also give me a place to live. I turned back to my mother and Richard. I want my money back. All of it. By the end of this week, or I'm going to report this as theft. Richard laughed out loud at that. Don't be ridiculous. You can't report your own mother for theft when she's on the account. And besides, you'd never sue your own mother. My mother laughed too, though it sounded forced. Emily, let's not make threats we don't mean. Come to dinner this Sunday and we'll discuss how we can help you save up again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had stolen my entire life savings and were acting like I was being unreasonable for wanting it back. I felt like I was in some kind of twisted nightmare. You have 1 week, I said, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. Either return my money or I'm going to the police. And this time I absolutely mean it. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, their dismissive laughter still ringing in my ears. I couldn't face going back to my apartment after the confrontation. Instead, I drove to my friend Amanda's place. Amanda and I had been through nursing school together, and she was one of the few people who truly understood how hard I had worked for that money. When I showed up at her door with mascara streaked down my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside, sat me on her couch, and poured me a glass of wine. Only then did she say, "Talk to me." I told her everything, my voice breaking several times, as I recounted Richard's casual dismissal of 7 years of my life. By the end of my story, Amanda looked as angry as I felt. You need to call a lawyer, she said firmly, like first thing tomorrow morning. Over the next few days, I tried repeatedly to contact my mother. I sent texts and left voicemails, all with the same message: return my money or face legal consequences. She read my texts. I could see the read receipts, but never responded. Following Amanda's advice, I consulted with a lawyer specializing in financial disputes. When I explained the situation, including the fact that my mother was on the joint account, he didn't dismiss my concerns like Richard had. While your mother did have legal access to the account, he explained, the fact that all the deposits came from you and that she took the entire amount without your knowledge or consent could constitute theft or financial exploitation, especially if we can prove the money was used for someone else's benefit rather than yours or hers. The consultation gave me hope that I had legal recourse, but it also made the betrayal even more real. I would potentially have to take my own mother to court to get back what was rightfully mine. My grandmother was my rock through this period. When I called to tell her what had happened, she wasn't surprised. Your mother has always chosen the easy path, she said with a sigh, and Richard has never seen you as family, not really. You stand your ground, Emily. Don't let them bully you into giving up what's yours. The emotional toll began to affect my work. I called in sick twice that week, something I had rarely done before. When I did go to the hospital, I made a medication error that thankfully was caught by a colleague before it reached the patient. My supervisor noticed my distraction and suggested I take some personal time, but I couldn't afford to miss the income, especially now. I visited the bank in person to speak with a manager about securing my account and preventing future unauthorized transfers. The manager was sympathetic, but explained that since the transfer had already been completed and was authorized by a legal account holder, there was nothing they could do to reverse it. The best thing you can do is remove your mother from the account and set up a new account solely in your name, she advised. I can help you do that today. I followed her advice, but it felt like closing the barn door after the horses had escaped. My life savings were already gone. Sunday dinner at my mother and Richard's house was a standing invitation, one I usually accepted out of a sense of obligation rather than desire. This Sunday, 1 week after discovering the theft, I decided to attend, but not for the usual family pleasantries. I arrived exactly on time, dressed in what Amanda called my business battle armor, a crisp blazer over a blouse and slacks. Richard raised an eyebrow when he saw me, but said nothing as I took my usual seat at the dining table. My mother brought out a roast that probably cost more than what I made in a day, acting as if nothing was wrong. Natalie was texting under the table, barely acknowledging my presence. It was a typical Sunday dinner, except for the fury simmering inside me. Halfway through the meal, Richard cleared his throat. Emily, your mother and I have been talking about your financial situation. I put down my fork, giving him my full attention. Have you decided to return my money? He laughed, that same dismissive laugh from our phone conversation. No, but we have a proposal for you. I'm willing to loan you $10,000 as a down payment on a starter apartment. Something more appropriate for someone at your stage of life. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. A loan. You steal $175,000 from me, and your solution is to loan me back a fraction of it. My mother jumped in her voice, taking on that wounded tone she used whenever I didn't show proper gratitude for her sacrifices. Emily, after all I've done for you, all the sacrifices I made raising you alone, I would think you'd be more understanding about helping your sister. Stepsister, I corrected automatically. And what exactly have you sacrificed lately, Mom? You live in a mansion, drive a luxury car, and haven't worked in 10 years. Meanwhile, I've been working myself to exhaustion trying to build a future. A future you just stole from me. Natalie, finally looking up from her phone, chimed in excitedly. Oh, I forgot to show you pictures of the apartment. It's absolutely gorgeous. The building has a doorman and a rooftop pool. She shoved her phone in front of me, swiping through photos of a sleek modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and brand new high-end furniture. As I looked at the photos, something didn't add up. How much did this apartment cost? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Natalie beamed. $400,000. Dad said it was a steal for that location. I felt sick. They hadn't just taken my money for Natalie's apartment, they had used my entire life savings as part of a much larger purchase that I would never have been able to afford myself. And based on the furnishings, they had spent at least another $50,000 decorating it. I stood up from the table. I've consulted with a lawyer. You have 48 hours to return my money, or I will be pursuing legal action. All of it not some insulting loan offer. Richard's face darkened. You're making a big mistake, Emily. Is money really worth destroying your relationship with your mother forever? I looked at my mother, who was staring down at her plate, silent tears running down her face. But she said nothing, offered no defense or support. In that moment, I realized our relationship had already been destroyed, not by my actions, but by hers. 48 hours, I repeated, and walked out. That night was one of the worst of my life. I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario in my mind. Was I really prepared to file charges against my own mother? Could I face the fallout from such a decision? But how could I let them get away with stealing 7 years of my life? The next morning, I dragged myself to work despite having barely slept. During my lunch break, I found myself talking to Denise, an older nurse who had always been kind to me. Something about her calm maternal presence made me confide in her about my situation. What I didn't expect was her immediate understanding. The same thing happened to me, she said quietly. My brother emptied our parents' accounts while holding power of attorney. Said it was for their care, but he bought himself a boat. What did you do? I asked. I fought like hell, she said, her gentle demeanor giving way to steely resolve. Reported it as elder financial abuse, took him to court. It took 2 years, but I got most of it back. Her story gave me the push I needed. If Denise could fight her own brother to protect her parents' money, I could certainly fight for what was mine. That evening, I did some research into financial abuse laws. While they primarily focused on protecting the elderly and vulnerable adults, the principles were similar to my situation. Someone in a position of trust abusing that trust for financial gain. Amanda had a friend named Jack who worked as a detective in the financial crimes unit. She arranged for me to meet with him unofficially over coffee the next day. Jack listened to my story without interruption, occasionally taking notes. "Here's the thing," he said when I finished. "Your mom being on the account complicates things, but doesn't make it impossible to pursue. The fact that the money was used to benefit your stepsister rather than your mother, or you makes this look less like a family financial decision and more like theft. So I can file a police report. You can and you should. Bring all your financial records, documentation of deposits, any text messages or emails discussing the money and a timeline of events. The more evidence you have that this money was understood to be yours, despite the joint account, the stronger your case will be." The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent hours gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Bank statements showing my regular deposits from work text messages, where my mother acknowledged the money was for my house fund, even birthday cards where she had written notes about how proud she was of my saving habits. With my folder of evidence in hand, I went to the police station and filed a report for grand theft. The officer taking my statement was professional but skeptical when I explained it involved my mother. However, when I showed him the amount $175,000, his attitude changed immediately. "This isn't a family squabble over a borrowed lawnmower," I told him firmly. "This is my life savings taken without my knowledge or consent to benefit someone else entirely." He assured me they would investigate, but warned me that family financial matters could be complicated to prosecute. I left the station feeling both relieved and terrified about what I had set in motion. Later that day, 2 officers visited my mother and Richard's home to take their statements. I wasn't present, but based on the furious phone call I received from Richard afterward, it didn't go well. "How dare you!" he shouted through the phone. "You've humiliated your mother, having police show up at our door like we're criminals. I always knew you were ungrateful, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." I remained calm. "Return my money and I'll withdraw the complaint." "This is going to destroy your mother," he threatened. "Is that what you want? To see her broken because of your selfishness?" Before I could respond, I heard my mother in the background asking for the phone. When she got on the line, her voice was trembling. "Emily, please stop this. Richard is furious. You're ruining everything. We can work something out, but please drop the charges." "Return my money, Mom. That's the only solution here." She started crying. "You know I don't have that kind of money on my own. It's all tied up in the apartment now." "Then sell the apartment," I suggested. "Or take out a home equity loan on the house. There are options, Mom, but stealing my money isn't one of them." She hung up without responding, and I was left wondering if I had just permanently damaged my relationship with my mother beyond repair. Surprisingly, later that night, I received a text from Natalie. "Emily, I swear I had no idea that was your money. Dad told me he was buying the apartment as an investment that I could live in. I feel awful about this. What can I do to help?" I wasn't sure if I believed her, but her message seemed genuine. I replied that the best thing she could do was encourage our parents to return the money they took from me. The following day, my supervisor at the hospital called me into her office. I was sure she was going to reprimand me for my recent performance issues, but instead, she offered me compassionate leave. "Amanda told me what you're going through," she explained. "Take 2 weeks with pay. Sort this out, get yourself right, then come back to us ready to work." I accepted gratefully, realizing for the first time how completely exhausted I was. My grandmother invited me to stay with her during my leave. "You need neutral territory," she said. "Somewhere you can clear your head and make decisions without the emotional pressure of being near them." I took her up on the offer, packing enough clothes for 2 weeks and making the hour drive to her house in the suburbs. Before I left, I made sure to change all my passwords, secure my remaining assets, and set up automatic payment for my bills. I wasn't sure what Richard might try next, but I wanted to be prepared. 2 days after filing the police report, I received a call from an attorney representing Richard and my mother. He introduced himself as Martin Goldman, speaking in the smooth, measured tones of someone used to diffusing volatile situations. "Ms. Walker, My clients are interested in resolving this matter privately without further legal proceedings. They are prepared to offer you $50,000 as a settlement. 50,000? I repeated incredulously. Out of 175,000 they took, that's less than a third of what they stole from me. They view it as a generous offer considering the complicated nature of joint accounts. The law isn't entirely clear on your claim to all of the funds. My lawyer disagrees, I said, bluffing slightly since I had only had a consultation. And so does the detective handling my case. Tell your clients the offer is rejected. I want the full amount plus interest for the time they've had it. Mr. Goldman sighed. I'll convey your response, but I urge you to reconsider. Court proceedings can be lengthy, expensive, and there's no guarantee of the outcome. I'll take my chances, I replied, and ended the call. Later that day, I received notification that a formal fraud investigation had been opened against my mother and Richard. What had started as a desperate attempt to recover my money was now taking on a life of its own, with potentially serious consequences for both of them. 1 week after filing the police report, formal charges were brought against my mother and Richard for grand theft and financial abuse. I was asked to come to the station to give a more detailed statement, which I did, providing them with all the evidence I had gathered. The detective assigned to my case, a serious woman named Detective Morales, listened attentively as I walked through the timeline of events, from opening the joint account as a teenager to discovering the money was gone. The fact that this account was established when you were a minor, and that all deposits came from your earnings, strengthens your case considerably, she told me. Additionally, the fact that they used the money to purchase an asset that solely benefits your stepsister, rather than your mother, shows clear intent. Richard Weiss soon discovered had more to lose than just money. As a real estate developer, his reputation in the business community was crucial to his success. When word began to spread about the charges against him, several of his business associates started distancing themselves. He attempted to use his connections to make the case disappear. I learned through Amanda's friend Jack that Richard had reached out to the police chief whom he knew socially, trying to frame the situation as a misunderstanding within the family. Fortunately, the chief recognized the seriousness of the allegations and refused to interfere. The local news picked up the story after Richard's name appeared in the public records of filed charges. The headline, "Prominent Developer Charged with Stealing Stepdaughter's Life Savings," was probably not the kind of publicity he had ever expected to receive. As the pressure mounted, the cracks in my mother and Richard's united front began to show. 3 days after the news story broke, my mother called me sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Emily," she gasped between sobs, "you don't understand what you've done. Richard is beside himself. His business partners are questioning his integrity. He says it's all my fault for not controlling you." Her words made my blood run cold. "Controlling me, Mom? He stole my life savings, and you helped him." "And you're worried about his reputation." "You don't understand," she repeated. "Richard isn't who you think he is. When things don't go his way, he can be different." For the first time, I wondered if there was more to the story than I knew. "Mom, is Richard abusive to you?" She didn't answer directly, but her silence spoke volumes. "He's been having financial problems," she finally admitted. "Some of his recent developments haven't been selling well. That's why he needed the money for Natalie's apartment." "What do you mean he needed the money? I thought the apartment was a gift for Natalie." Another pause. "The apartment is actually in Richard's name. Natalie is just living there. It's an investment property he couldn't afford to buy on his own right now." The revelation stunned me. Not only had they taken my money without permission, but the story about buying it for Natalie had been a partial lie. Richard had used my money to shore up his own investments during a financial downturn. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed professionally, and carrying my folder of evidence. My grandmother insisted on coming with me for moral support, and Amanda took the day off work to be there as well. Richard and my mother arrived with their attorney, Mr. Goldman. Richard looked immaculate as always in an expensive suit, but his face was tight with anger. My mother looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks, her complexion sallow, and her eyes ringed with dark circles. As we waited in the hallway outside the courtroom, Richard approached me, leaving my mother and their lawyer several feet away. "You can still stop this," he said in a low voice. "Tell them you want to withdraw the charges and we can work something out privately." "I tried that approach," I reminded him. "You offered me less than a third of what you took." His public facade cracked slightly, a flash of fury crossing his face before he controlled it. "Do you really want to see your mother prosecuted?" "She could go to jail, Emily. Can you live with that?" Before I could answer, we were interrupted by the surprise appearance of Natalie. She walked down the hallway toward us, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "Dad," she said, not acknowledging me at first. "I need to talk to you." Richard looked annoyed. "Not now, Natalie. We're about to go into the hearing." "Yes, now," she insisted, showing a backbone I hadn't realized she possessed. Then she turned to me. "Emily, I'm sorry about everything. I've moved out of the apartment. I can't live there knowing how it was paid for." Richard's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You did what without discussing it with me first?" "I'm an adult dad. I can make my own decisions. And I decide not to be part of stealing from my stepsister." It was the first time Natalie had ever referred to me as her stepsister, instead of just Emily or your daughter, when speaking to our parents. The significance wasn't lost on me. Inside the courtroom, the hearing began with the prosecutor outlining the charges and presenting the evidence I had provided. When my mother was called to testify, she seemed to shrink in the witness stand, her voice barely audible as she answered questions. "Mrs. Hamilton," the prosecutor said, using my mother's married name, "did you withdraw $175,000 from the joint account you held with your daughter?" "Yes," she admitted. "And what was that money used for?" She glanced at Richard before answering. "To make a down payment on an apartment." "Who lives in that apartment?" "My stepdaughter, Natalie." "And did you discuss this withdrawal with your daughter, Emily, before making it?" Another glance at Richard. "No." "Had you and Emily ever discussed the purpose of the money in that account?" "She was saving for a house," my mother whispered. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone, interrupted at this point. "Mrs. Hamilton, I want to be clear about something. You took your daughter's life savings, which you knew she was setting aside to purchase a home without her knowledge or consent, and used it to buy property for your stepdaughter instead." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I need a verbal answer for the record," the judge prompted. "Yes," my mother said, her voice breaking. The judge shook her head in evident disgust. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many betrayals of trust, but few as blatant as this. Family financial accounts are based on trust and good faith. What you and your husband did was not just legally questionable, but a profound moral failing." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His carefully constructed image as a successful businessman and family man was crumbling before his eyes. After all testimony was heard, including mine, the judge called a brief recess. During this time, Mr. Goldman approached me and my attorney, who had agreed to represent me after seeing the strength of my case. "My clients wish to propose a settlement," he said. "Full repayment of the $175,000 plus $25,000 in interest and damages in exchange for dropping all criminal charges." My attorney looked at me. "It's your decision, Emily. We have a strong case, but a settlement guarantees you get your money back without a protracted court battle." I thought about my mother's tearful testimony and the revelation that Richard might be financially abusive as well as emotionally manipulative. I thought about Natalie's unexpected show of support, and I thought about my own exhaustion after weeks of fighting this battle. "I'll accept the settlement on one condition," I said. "I want my mother to tell me herself that she understands what she did was wrong. Not through you, not with Richard present. Just her and me." Mr. Goldman conferred with his clients, and surprisingly, Richard agreed to let my mother speak with me alone. We found a quiet corner of the courthouse where we could talk privately. My mother looked broken, all the polished sophistication she had adopted during her marriage to Richard stripped away. "I'm so sorry, Emily," she said, meeting my eyes for the first time that day. I know what I did was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I did it, but I was afraid to stand up to Richard. Why, Mom? Why would you do that to me? She shook her head sadly. I've spent 10 years trying to be who Richard wants me to be. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be myself, how to be your mother. When he told me he needed the money for an investment property, I was too afraid to say no. Did you even think about what that money meant to me? All the extra shifts, the holidays I worked, the sacrifices I made, every day since, she admitted. Every single day. I keep seeing your face when you confronted us, and I hate myself for what I did to you. For the first time since discovering the theft, I saw genuine remorse in my mother. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it opened a tiny possibility that someday, somehow we might find a way to rebuild what had been broken. I'll accept the settlement, I told her, but things won't go back to how they were before. They can't. She nodded, wiping away tears. I know, but maybe someday you can forgive me, even if you never forget. As we returned to the courtroom, I noticed Richard watching us with a calculating expression. I realized then that even if we resolved the legal aspect of this situation, the emotional fallout would continue for a long time to come. In that moment, Natalie approached me again. I meant what I said about moving out of the apartment. Dad can do whatever he wants with it, but I won't benefit from something that hurt you so much. I was surprised by her sincerity. Thank you, Natalie. That means more than you know. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I know. I wish I had half your courage. It was possibly the first genuine compliment she had ever given me, and despite everything, it touched me deeply. When the judge returned, we informed her that we had reached a settlement agreement. She reviewed the terms carefully before addressing all parties. While I'm pleased you've come to an agreement, I want to be very clear that what happened here was not merely a misunderstanding or a family disagreement. It was theft, plain and simple. I'm approving the settlement, but be aware that any violation of its terms will result in the immediate reinstatement of criminal charges. Do I make myself clear? Richard and my mother both nodded soberly. As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mixture of relief, exhaustion, and lingering sadness. I had won in a sense, but the victory felt hollow considering what I had lost in terms of family relationships. My grandmother squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, Emily. Don't ever doubt that. I hoped she was right. The settlement agreement required Richard and my mother to repay me within 30 days. To raise the funds, Richard was forced to sell one of his investment properties, a situation that clearly wounded his pride deeply. The property reportedly sold for less than its market value, due to Richard's need for a quick sale, adding to his financial troubles. The formal documentation included specific repayment terms, interest calculations, and a timeline. My attorney insisted on clear consequences for any default, including automatic reinstatement of criminal charges and additional financial penalties. It was strange and sad to have such a formal legal agreement with my own mother, but after what had happened, it was necessary. As the dust began to settle on the legal battle, the personal fallout continued. My mother called to tell me she had moved out of Richard's house and was staying in a hotel. I can't be there right now, she explained. Every conversation turns into an argument about you and the money. He blames me for everything, says I should have handled you better. Handled me, Mom? I'm not a PR problem. I'm your daughter. I know, she said quietly. That's why I left. I need to figure out who I am away from him. I've lost myself these past 10 years. I wasn't sure what to make of this development. Part of me was glad she was separating herself from Richard's toxic influence, but another part wondered if this was just another manipulation tactic to gain my sympathy. Natalie surprised me by becoming an unexpected ally through this period. True to her word, she had moved out of the apartment and was staying with a friend. She texted me occasionally brief messages of support or questions about how I was doing. It was a strange new dynamic between us. Tentative but more authentic than any interaction we'd had in the past 10 years. Dad's selling the apartment, she told me during one of our text exchanges. He says he can't afford to keep it after repaying you. I think he's in more financial trouble than he's admitting. I wasn't particularly concerned about Richard's financial troubles, given what he had tried to do to me, but I appreciated Natalie's candor. With the settlement agreement in place, I focused on rebuilding my financial security. I transferred the repayment to a new account at a different bank, one where my mother had never had any connection. I met with a financial advisor who helped me set up additional security measures and develop a plan to rebuild my savings. The emotional toll of the entire ordeal was harder to address. I found myself experiencing anxiety attacks when checking my bank balance, constantly afraid that my money might disappear again. I had nightmares about being homeless or discovering other betrayals. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and family conflicts. My colleagues at the hospital were surprisingly supportive. News of what had happened had spread, and many of them shared stories of their own family financial disputes. One nurse organized a small fundraiser to help me cover the legal fees, which touched me deeply. My grandmother remained my strongest supporter throughout. She opened her home to me whenever I needed a break from my apartment and the memories it held of planning for a house I hadn't been able to buy. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she told me one evening as we sat on her porch. "He always said you had more backbone than the rest of the family combined." I smiled at that. "I get it from you, Grandma." Richard continued to harbor resentment toward me, sending occasional text messages blaming me for his business difficulties and my mother's departure. I eventually blocked his number, deciding that nothing productive could come from maintaining any contact with him. As the deadline for repayment approached, I grew increasingly anxious. What if they didn't pay? Would we have to go back to court? The thought of dragging this out even longer was exhausting. But 2 days before the deadline, the full amount was transferred into my account. $200,000, the original $175,000, plus the agreed-upon interest and damages. Seeing that balance in my account again brought tears to my eyes, not just of relief, but of vindication. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. Yet the victory felt incomplete. My relationship with my mother remained fragile and uncertain. Richard was still a toxic presence in our family dynamics, and the trust that had been broken seemed almost impossible to repair. The nightmares gradually became less frequent. The anxiety attacks when checking my bank balance slowly subsided. I began to look at house listings again, though with a more cautious approach than before. Through it all, I kept reminding myself of what my grandmother had said: I had done the right thing. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary, even when the people you're standing up to are family. Perhaps especially then. 6 months after the settlement, I finally bought my house. It wasn't the same one I had been about to make an offer on when I discovered the theft. It was actually better, a charming 3-bedroom craftsman with a small backyard and front porch. It was modest by Richard's standards, but to me it represented everything I had fought for: a place that was entirely mine, bought with money I had earned, and then fought to reclaim. The day I moved in, Amanda and several other friends from the hospital helped carry furniture and unpack boxes. My grandmother brought homemade curtains for the kitchen windows and a plant for the front porch. It was a day filled with laughter and celebration, a stark contrast to the tears and anger of the past months. I had implemented every financial security measure possible. My accounts were now at a different bank solely in my name, with additional verification steps required for any large transactions. I had set up alerts for any unusual activity and maintained a separate emergency fund at yet another institution. Perhaps it was overkill, but after what had happened, I couldn't be too careful. My mother and Richard were still technically married, but living separately in what she called a trial separation. She had rented a small apartment and was looking for a job, something she hadn't done in over a decade. It was strange to see her trying to rebuild her independence after so many years of relying on Richard. We had begun the slow process of reconnecting, meeting for coffee every other week. Our conversations were still awkward and sometimes tense, but there was an honesty between us that hadn't existed before. She was seeing a therapist of her own, trying to understand how she had lost herself so completely in her marriage to Richard. "I keep thinking about who I was before I met him," she told me during one of our coffee meetings. I was strong once. I raised you on my own, worked 2 jobs, kept a roof over our heads. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that woman. She's still there, Mom, I said gently. You just need to find her again. More surprisingly, I had developed an unexpected friendship with Natalie. After moving out of the apartment Richard had bought with my money, she had found a place of her own and a job at a local boutique. It was the first time in her life she'd been truly independent, and the experience was transforming her. I never had to work for anything before, she admitted when she came to see my new house. Dad always just gave me whatever I wanted. I never understood the value of earning something yourself until now. Seeing her growth from the entitled girl who had taken my stolen money without question to a young woman trying to make her own way gave me hope that people could indeed change when forced to confront their mistakes. My career was thriving too. I had been promoted to charge nurse on my unit, a position that came with more responsibility but also a higher salary. My colleagues had been incredibly supportive through everything, and I felt a deeper connection to them after sharing my struggles. I had even started dating again, something I hadn't had much time for during the years of working multiple jobs to save for a house. His name was Jason, a physical therapist I met through work. He was kind, respectful, and most importantly, understood my need for independence, including financial independence. My parents went through a messy divorce when I was a kid, he explained on our third date. Money was always the biggest issue. It taught me that everyone needs their own safety net no matter how much you trust someone. His understanding of my financial boundaries was refreshing after the betrayal I had experienced. Therapy had been essential in helping me process the trauma of what had happened. My therapist, Dr. Linton, had helped me work through the feelings of betrayal, anger, and lingering fear. I still had occasional nightmares, but they were becoming less frequent. Trust is like a mirror, Dr. Linton told me during one session. Once it's broken, you can put it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. That doesn't mean you can't build new different relationships with these people, but they won't be the same as before. I had taken those words to heart, establishing clear boundaries with my mother, and being cautious about how much I shared with her about my personal and financial life. Richard remained the most difficult aspect of the situation. Though we rarely interacted directly, his presence still loomed over my relationship with my mother. She admitted that he continued to pressure her to return home, alternating between apologies and accusations, depending on his mood. To my surprise, about 4 months after the settlement, I received an email from him. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. Emily, it began more formal than his usual dismissive tone. I want to acknowledge that what happened with your money was wrong. While I still believe we had legitimate reasons for needing the funds, the way we went about it was inappropriate. The situation has cost me more than just money, and I am trying to learn from it. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but from Richard it was unprecedented. I suspected his financial and marital problems had humbled him somewhat, forcing him to reevaluate his actions. I didn't respond to the email, but I saved it as evidence of his admission of wrongdoing. One unexpected outcome of my experience was that it inspired me to help others in similar situations. When a younger nurse on my unit confided that her parents were pressuring her to give them access to her savings, just in case, I shared my story and connected her with resources to protect herself. I even started volunteering with a financial literacy program for young adults, teaching them about the importance of maintaining financial independence and protecting their assets. It felt empowering to turn my painful experience into something that could help others avoid similar situations. My grandmother watched my healing journey with pride. At 82, she had lived through her own share of hardships and betrayals, emerging stronger from each one. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, she told me one Sunday afternoon as we sat on my new front porch. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself to release the anger that eats at you. Reconciliation is about rebuilding a relationship, and it takes both parties to make it work. I'm trying to forgive, I admitted. But reconciliation feels impossible sometimes, especially with Richard. Then focus on forgiving for your own peace, and let reconciliation happen if and when it's right. Not everyone deserves a place in your life, Emily, even family. Her wisdom has always helped guide me through the complicated emotional landscape I was navigating. As I settled into my new home and new life, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in just 6 months. I had lost and regained my savings, but I had gained something even more valuable, a deeper understanding of my own strength and resilience. I had learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential, that family should support your dreams, not steal them, that financial independence is a form of freedom that should be protected at all costs. Most importantly, I had learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage, it's about trust, respect, and mutual support. Sometimes the family you choose, like Amanda and my grandmother, proves more reliable than the family you're born into. My house wasn't just a building with walls and a roof. It represented everything I had fought for: my independence, my future, my right to keep what I had earned. Every time I walked through the front door, I felt a sense of accomplishment and pride that no one could take away. The road to healing wasn't straight or easy. There were still days when the hurt and betrayal felt fresh, when I questioned whether I could ever truly trust my mother again. But I was moving forward one day at a time, rebuilding my life on my own terms. As I look back on this painful chapter of my life, I wonder, have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of you? How did you balance maintaining relationships with protecting yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves, even against family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your financial independence is worth fighting for.